The Nagoya Protocol on ABS is an international agreement intended to ensure the implementation of Objective 3 of the Convention on Biological Diversity, that is the fair share of benefits arising from the utilization of genetic resources. The goal is to contribute to the conservation and sustainable use of global biodiversity. Since its launch in 2017, the UNDP-GEF Global ABS Project has assisted 23 countries in strengthening their human resources, legal frameworks, and institutional capacities to implement the Nagoya Protocol at the national level. Thanks to the full commitment of project countries, the UNDP-GEF Global ABS Project has supported the creation of national legal frameworks, including the drafting of 23 ABS laws and regulations, 7 of which have already been approved by their national authorities. To promote bioprospecting activities, the project helped producing 7 strategies, resulting in 39 partnerships between users and providers of genetic resources. The project has supported the draft of 24 biocultural community protocols in 12 countries, 30 ABS codes of conduct, and 12 measures to protect traditional knowledge. All these efforts led to the signature of some 215 ABS commercial agreements. To strengthen global cooperation from governments and indigenous people, local communities to researchers, private companies and academia, the UNDP-GEF Global ABS Project launched the first global ABS community of practice. This community will provide guidance for the successful implementation of the Nagoya Protocol after project completion, while also maintaining the legacy work and lessons learned during project implementation. With 696 registered members worldwide, the community of practice includes discussion forums, webinars, articles, and case studies organized by thematic areas. It also offers professional, legal, and business services free of charge to both providers and users of genetic resources. And it is the platform to display national, regional, and global online events such as the Global ABS Conference 2020, which mobilized key ABS actors from around the world to celebrate the 10th anniversary of the Nagoya Protocol. Looking ahead, the objective of this final workshop is to share lessons, challenges, and strategies to ensure the sustainability of project outcomes, identify gaps and needs that still need to be addressed for the effective implementation of the protocol, and to address and discuss opportunities to facilitate mutual collaboration at the regional and global levels. While this project is coming to an end, we have built a foundation to ensure its legacy lives on. We have walked a long way together, and thanks to your efforts, we have built a fairer and greener global system that can lead us to a more sustainable and equitable development. ABS is work in progress, But there are still challenges ahead. But we need to keep the momentum to make ABS the rule and not the exception. For our nature and people, let's make ABS work for all.
Welcome, colleagues, to this webinar, Can Blockchain Improve Traceability of Access to Genetic Resources and Benefit Sharing? A pilot project presentation. This webinar will have a presentation from the project team that has conducted this collaboration, in this case, the colleagues from PricewaterhouseCoopers. And also we will have a panel discussion with some of the key experts that have been working in the development of the Global ABS project, but also more specifically on this part on blockchain. During the webinar today, let me just introduce very quickly the panels. Sorry, I will give you the session. No, let's go ahead. I will introduce the protocol that we will follow during this session. This session is being recorded and it will be available through the Global ABS community, the community of practice of the UNDP-GEF Global ABS Project. During this session, participants' microphones will be muted, but participants will be able to ask questions through the Q&A chat box available at the toolbar located at the bottom of your screen. Participants' questions will be addressed after the panelists' presentations during the Q&A section. And we invite you and encourage you to continue the discussions on the topic of this webinar at the Global ABS community and leave your discussion on the forum section. Well, my name is Alejandro Lago. I'm the project manager of the UNDP-GEF Global ABS project. And today we are going to hear from the colleagues that have been directly developing this pilot project proposal to test blockchain on ABS. First, we will hear from Afshar Akal, who has been the project team leader. And then in the second part of the webinar, we will have a panel discussion. We will have with us, Afshar will also be part of that panel, and we will have Dr. Mathur, the chairman of the Indian National Biodiversity Authority. We will have Nicolette Swart, who is a technical expert and has been supporting the UNDP-GEF Global ABS project. And also we will receive for the technical part the support of our colleagues Chrissy Sani and Nakulang Narajan. So with any further delay, let me just give you have seen the video of the summary of the Global ABS project. The Global ABS project in this initial phase is now coming to an end. We have managed to support countries in the development, strengthening their capacity, institutional and legal capacity to implement access and benefit sharing and the Nagoya Protocol. The project focused on 23 countries around the world, but we have been supporting other countries also in other activities. Key developments that have been conducted during these 4 years of the project. 23 draft legal frameworks have been developed. 8 of them have been approved, and we congratulate in particular Jordan that was able to approve this year their ABS by law. and also Honduras that less than a month ago approved their ABS legislation. And another 6 countries that during the implementation of the project were able to also approve different legal rules related to access and benefit sharing. Institutional capacity, legal frameworks, researchers, so stakeholders involvement. We focus very much on building trust between providers and users of genetic resources, and we have been supporting different biodiscovery projects. Of course, training stakeholders on this matter and right holders on this matter has been crucial, and the project has been very successful, reaching out even to indigenous peoples and local communities, and training on the key principles of the Convention on Biological Diversity, access to genetic resources and benefit sharing, the Nagoya Protocol, and Sustainable Development Goals to more than 12,874 stakeholders around the world. Plus the online activities that have been forced due to the pandemic, to move into this online virtual reality, and also supporting indigenous peoples and local communities to manage their own genetic resources and their own traditional knowledge associated with those genetic resources through the development of biocultural community protocols. And creating a platform, the Global ABS community, that is a community of practice on access and benefit sharing that serves everyone around the world with interest on these matters, and that pretends to connect, to serve as a platform to exchange experiences, but more important, to provide solutions through the mobilization of resources, technical and also financial resources from different places to make things happen. And in that context, the project detected an opportunity to go into more innovative means, and we detected that blockchain could be an important tool to support the implementation of access and benefit sharing and the Nagoya Protocol. And in that context, we launched a contract, consultancy, and the colleagues, collaboration with Pricewaterhouse Turkey, and also in collaboration with Pricewaterhouse India. We conducted a specific design of a pilot project to test blockchain and smart contracts on access and benefit sharing. And in that context is where we want to present you what we have done on this specific topic, and to learn if this is possible, and we will be able to go ahead in a second phase with different challenges. We will also have to go through the different challenges that we have ahead, but let's go step by step. Let's go first to hear from Afshar, what you have done, Afshar, during this collaboration with the Global ABS Project. Can you please explain us what was the result of this collaboration? What is the pilot project about?
Sure. So good morning, good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you today to share the initial outputs of the pilot design that we did with PricewaterhouseCoopers India team for Nagoya Protocol implementation with blockchain. So let me quickly share my screen and open my presentation. So this webinar is about how blockchain technology can help traceability of access and benefit sharing. starts with a question. And the simple answer for that is yes, blockchain can help with traceability, but it goes beyond that. Blockchain is a technology that has disrupted a number of industries, initially the financial services. So how this technology could help us create a socially useful functionality in biodiversity preservation and commercial and academic benefits or any other non-commercial benefits that can arise from implementation of Nagoya Protocol is what we try to uncover during this 3.5 month pilot project design. Usually, blockchain is a technical question that is in the minds of many people. What is it in simple terms? And how it works is where we should probably start before we go into the details of how we use this technology to Nagoya Protocol. And a blockchain is essentially a database, but unlike centralized databases, it is decentralized. So a copy of the information, which we call ledger, is kept by a number of parties involved, which is identical in all grounds. And the critical thing here is this database is accessible and users can append information into it, but they cannot delete it. And that's where the property of immutability of blockchain comes from. So that's where the main primary advantage of having a transparent traceability tracking options or use cases arise with this technology is from the immutability nature of this decentralized database. So the way it works is it usually starts with a user requesting a transaction. And it is not just a single party. There is often another party involved, at least two. And if it's a transaction between two parties, it is essentially a contract. And in any contractual relationship, you may have disputes. So what blockchain helps with is to help with finalizing this transaction with the least hassle, without hassle, in fact, as possible. And in order to do that, once a transaction request comes, it gets broadcast to these distributed network of nodes, which we call validator nodes. And these are essentially witnesses that this requester has invited to the party to come and see what the two parties are trying to do. In the tech space, in the tech parlance, we call this validator nodes. So most often people know this as miners in the crypto asset space, but essentially they are validators. But when the parties enter into this contractual relationship and they invite these validators, these witnesses, these are not really the parties' friends, because these validators could collude among themselves and they might choose to distort the truth and side with one of the parties which benefits them financially or otherwise. That's why we need a way of validating and verifying the transactions independent of each other, and then use an algorithmic consensus mechanism to find out the true and fair view of what is happening at transactional level. So if 51%, at least 51% of those nodes are saying that this is a true and fair view of this transaction, then we technically say that, okay, it's good to go, so let's include this in a block. And where the blockchain comes into is you do not need to go and validate, verify each transaction one by one. In order to do it efficiently, you batch them into what we call blocks, and then those blocks are added into each other with a cryptographic hash that makes it immutable before it is finalized. So essentially, that's what the blockchain does. It helps at least two parties entering into a contract where there might be potential disputes down the track. They invite these witnesses, which we call validator nodes, and make sure that they don't collude between themselves, do not distort the truth, and then finalize the transaction in a hassle-free manner. So what we did is to design the pilot, we first looked at how the Nagoya Protocol currently operates without a technological intervention like blockchain. So this assessment stage was to understand the pain points. What are the bottlenecks in implementing Nagoya Protocol? Then we said, okay, let's make a strategic technological intervention and use blockchain where we can easily list the biological material, get their internationally recognized certificates of compliance, help the participants trade, the primary producers all the way to the end users, and then share these benefits among them. So after this stage, we sat down and said, let's develop a minimum viable product and use this in our pilot demonstration. And then find draw a pilot roadmap for implementing this with the full functionality and scope that we intended to do. And traceability is, as I mentioned, just one of them. So in order to synthesize the problem, let's look at, apart from traceability, what else we can do with blockchain. And among the problem themes, traceability is the first. So you would like to know the provenance of where primary goods are coming from, the biological material. Is it an endangered species? How is it being produced? Is there any traditional knowledge involved with that? So this is the first problem theme that blockchain can solve. Then the other thing is there's actually no centralized repository of all the genetic material in the world. So we then asked ourselves, okay, if there's no centralized one, why not we build a decentralized version of it so it could be accessed by any potential user in the system? Then we looked at, there are many countries in the Nagoya Protocol. I think 131 countries have ratified it. And not all of them are at the same level of digital transformation. Some of them are more mature than others. So we said that whatever solution we come up with, it needs to certainly have the absolute base minimum to cater for the main objectives, such as traceability and tracking and access and benefit sharing. But we also need to take into account that not all countries are ready with digital transformations. And then the fourth, fifth, and sixth are topics, which is access and benefit sharing, is something that is possible with what we call smart contract code in blockchain. So you can find out who would like to access these genetic materials. If there is a new material that needs to be registered for obtaining a certificate of compliance, and then if there is a user who wants to use this genetic material, how we allow easy access to this information, and then a real contractual issue between parties, which might be open for dispute, will be in prior informed consent and mutually agreed terms. So we need to code these into the solution. And in some countries, these might be just one step, like pick and map, no differences. In some countries, that might be separate. And then finally, the tracking of it. And tracking is a little bit different than tracing. Tracing, you actually trace the actual goods from primary production to end users. In tracking, we also look at benefit sharing. So there might be financial or non-commercial benefits that need to be tracked and make sure that the parties involved are getting their fair share. And finally, the major benefit of blockchain technology, because it's distributed, is privacy and security. And at the end of the day, this is going to be an enterprise-grade solution where governments, private sector, and users, individual users will be interacting with. So the data has to be kept in a private and secure fashion. So with the problem identification, we then put up a product vision. How should a product look like? So the first item is it should have certain capabilities that Nagoya Protocol aims to solve. So biodiversity, protection of endangered species, fair sharing of benefits. So we said all these capabilities need to be handled by this product. And then we entered into functionalities. How could it enable users to quickly access the information, get the necessary permissions, and if you look at it from the user's perspective, anything that you're doing with a technological intervention, you're actually trying to simplify the operational workflows that exist already, which is probably paper-based. So if you look at the cross color code, the pink functionality across in the automation space, when we automate these bureaucratic tasks, what we're trying to achieve is simplify those workflows so that be it the government agency implementing it or a user that wants to access it, it actually makes it simpler, quicker, more efficient. And the efficiency, apart from providing this with a technological intervention, also needs to efficiently help users get access to genetic material and facilitate the transfers between primary producers to end users, and then going through the other steps of benefit sharing. This is a technological solution, and it's not independent of other technological solutions. So we also looked into how we can integrate other technologies, such as geographical geotagging technologies, QR codes, especially when you're transferring value from one to other, you could use QR codes. If it's a genetic material that is associated with a particle geographical location, then you can geotag them. So we also took those into account and put some thought into how we can make it interoperable. So without being bound by a legacy technology solution that only owners of that technology can access. And lastly, it's quite important, the ownership of this is not a government. It's not a government solution. It's a multi-party. It will be private enterprise, government, and individual users. They'll all be able to participate in this. And this is one of the good positive attributes of blockchain technology. Generally speaking, it's permissionless, and it creates an environment where the protocol could easily accept anyone who is happy to be bound by the protocol, join the protocol, and benefit from its functionality and use. And for developing the pilot project, we identified its scope and functions. And we also carefully looked into how we're going to finance this. And the financial element is not just for the pilot itself, but also for the long term. And we'll devote some time in the panel discussion into stakeholder and crowd-based financing of this project. And usually once the financial piece is solved, you can then go into development, and development will go beyond the minimum viable product. It will be a full-fledged development of the product. And then the pilot implementation will also look into first India implementation, which is a large country in its own right, and then gradually scaling it to other countries and other industries. And it's worth mentioning that the pilot project that we chose as an industry focused on pharmaceutical industry in India. And we also gave thought on governance. Because it is not owned by any entity, neither UNDP nor a particular government or any of the governments, it's collectively owned, then there needs to be a governance mechanism in terms of both maintaining the network as well as the functions that are going to be built into it. So my last slide is a little bit crowded, but I'll try to cherry pick and give a couple of appetizers, because Christy and Nakulan will actually show a nice video of how this works. But generally speaking, you have different people accessing the solution. This could be a primary producer who would like to list their genetic material and maybe obtain an internationally recognized certificate of compliance. It could be a user, it could be a pharmaceutical company who would like to access this material, and they will later consider commercializing this. So they might go through various stages of through the supply chain, from distribution to importer, exporter, and then importer. And the way Nagoya Protocol works is actually quite good. There are many checkpoints which a blockchain technology fits perfectly for validating. So you may have, when you're tracing the biological material going from primary producer to the end user, you will pass through various checkpoints. This could be a port authority who's signing the import material. It could be some agency technically equipped with identifying what is being exported. It could belong to an endangered species, so they need to identify that. And the reason why it's being used is probably for an academic research purposes. So all of these could actually be done with global checkpoints. And like in the first slide where we explained how blockchain helps with this, is you actually invite witnesses like these checkpoints and say, okay, here's a piece of information, please verify and then validate. And then when it comes to commercial benefit sharing, then there will be financial institutions involved. And then there will be a payments module that will help transferring the value from one party to the other. So that is probably the easiest, one of the easiest things to do with blockchain, because most of its current implementations are in the financial services domain. And if you look in the middle of the section, we have the blockchain ledger. So it's where our decentralized database is. All these users, the primary producers, the pharmaceutical companies, cosmetics companies, port authorities, they can access this ledger and they can interact with it and then perform various tasks. And then more importantly, we have on the government side, the competent national authorities who do help with the prior informed consent and mutually agreed terms deals, as well as registering the IRCC documents if a request comes so. So without further ado, I'll just quickly summarize the road ahead for UNDP and its partners, how we can scope the pilot and scale. First of all, we need to publish the project. It will either be a terms of reference or a white paper where we propose how the project can be implemented and get the necessary buy-in from the organizations who are going to be benefiting from this, be the government or private enterprise. And then we need to get the mind share of everyone on how this is going to be financed. So in our reports, we put up two options. One is the good old stakeholder funded model, which UN agencies are familiar with. So they can work with governments, multilaterals, bilaterals, charitable institutions to get funding for this project. But one of the functionalities that or benefits of blockchain is crowdfunding, and it actually gives you access to large numbers of people who can contribute small sums to a socially good project. So we also looked into how this could be done, and there are certain legal and regulatory considerations to go through an initial token or coin offering mode. But we think that it seriously needs consideration for this project to scale beyond India and beyond pharmaceutical industry only. And then once we sold the finance, then we developed the full blown product, not just the minimum viable product. So everything in the functionality that we discussed, from traceability to access and benefit sharing elements, we will help, or whoever is going to work on this will develop the product and code them into smart contract languages using smart contract language code. And then you take the physical product to implementation. So you then have face-to-face interactions with the government authorities, especially in India. We will work with the competent national authority, and Dr. Mathur is with us to share his thoughts on this. And then the pilot will be kicked off and go live, hopefully in less than a year. So that's what I have to share. So I hope this brief information is useful for our workshop webinar participants. So I'll let our India team to show a video of how the pilot works. So take it away, please, Christy or Nagoya. And thanks for listening.
The Global ABS Tracker is a blockchain-based value exchange and benefit-sharing platform that brings users, providers, and relevant authorities to facilitate listing, consent recording, trading, and benefit transfer of genetic resources. The platform will be powered by smart contracts for issue of PIC, MAT, IRCC, and ensure transfer of benefits through issue of tokens, that is, digital coins pegged to national fiat currency. In this conference room POC video demonstration, we will showcase one positive business lifecycle and the various interactions on the blockchain platform amongst the following stakeholders: users, providers, competent national authority, provincial competent national authority, which are provincial bodies reporting to the competent national authorities, checkpoints, which are bodies with the mandate to review and report use of movement of genetic resource traditional knowledge, bank, network administrator, and publishing authority. The network administrator has already been added on to the blockchain network by the system integrator developing the blockchain solution. The network administrator therefore can now add competent national authorities of Nagoya Protocol signatory nations to the blockchain network. The authorized ABS official logs in into the ABS integrated traceability and security platform. On the left panel of the landing page, the official can view the various options available, which includes addition of new competent national authority participants on the blockchain network. The official clicks on the link and finds a drop-down list of various Nagoya Protocol signatory countries that can be added to the network. For the purpose of this demonstration, we have selected India as the competent national authority. Once the official selects India and hits submit, a pop-up notification intimates that the National Biodiversity Authority, which is the authorized competent national authority of India, has been added to the blockchain platform as a participant. The transaction ID, blockchain hash, and timestamp of the transaction is displayed as well. Additionally, details pertaining to India as a signatory to the Nagoya Protocol is listed. Now, India Competent National Authority will be able to add provincial competent national authorities to the network. The authorized India Competent National Authority official signs into the India Competent National Authority portal. On the left panel of the landing page, the official can view the various options available, which includes addition of provincial competent national authorities, or in India's parlance, the state biodiversity boards to the network. The official clicks on the link and finds a drop-down list of various provinces or states in India that can be added to the network. For the purpose of this demonstration, we have selected the province Kerala as the provincial body. Once the official selects Kerala and hits submit, a pop-up notification intimates that the National Biodiversity Authority, which is the authorized competent national authority of India, has added Kerala to the blockchain platform as a participant. The transaction ID, blockchain hash, and timestamp of the transaction is also displayed. Another feature that is made available to the competent national authority is the addition of checkpoints. The feature can be accessed on the left panel of the competent national authority's landing page. The officer clicks on the checkpoint tab. A list of potential checkpoints is displayed. After selecting the checkpoint, the official submits the request. For the purpose of the demonstration, we are adding the Jawaharlal Nehru Port Trust as a potential checkpoint. Once submitted, the checkpoint is added to the network. Henceforth, the checkpoint may access the blockchain system to verify the PIC, MAT, and IRCC of shipments. The global ABS tracker, envisaged as a marketplace, would provide both providers and users a platform to list their products, elicit quick responses, and ultimately facilitate benefit sharing. The seller or provider accesses the portal through a URL and finds a page with the sign up and sign in option. The provider clicks on the sign up button to self register and fills up the KYC form. The provider, in this case Mr. Koshi, can also choose the recipient of the registration form from a drop down list. For the purpose of the demonstration, the recipient of the provider's registration form is the provincial competent national authority body in the state of Kerala in India. Once submitted and approved, Mr. Koshi accesses the page containing Indian products listed on the global ABS Tracker platform. On the top right of the page, a button to add product is provided. Mr. Koshi clicks on the button and fills up the product listing form. Since the resource that he wants to list on the platform, Sidzium Travancorium, is from Kerala, the province name is selected as such. The resource code is a codified version of the country code, province code, resource type, and the resource name. After completing the form, it is submitted for approval. Mr. Koshi receives a notification that the product has been submitted for verification. The respective provincial competent national authority, Kerala, in this case, receives a notification on their landing page. The official clicks on the notification to view the listing request. Here, details pertaining to the product that Mr. Koshi wants to list on the platform, as well as other KYC details, are mentioned. Once the officer approves the request, a pop-up comes up with the information that the product is successfully approved. Sidzium Travancorium is now listed under the products category of the platform as serial number 5. Like providers, users can also access the global ABS tracker portal through a URL leading them to a sign-in or sign-up page. The user in our demonstration is Mylan, a pharmaceutical company from France, clicks on the sign-up button to self-register and fills up the KYC form. Details pertaining to type of industry, BUNS number, and purpose of accessing the resource are captured. The user also gets an option to select the competent national authority nation where it intends to register itself. In this case, it is India. Mylan fills up the form and submits it. India Competent National Authority receives a notification. User has sent access request for approval. The Competent National Authority official clicks on the notification and a pop-up appears with the details filled in by Mylan. The competent national authority official gets an option to either reject or approve Mylan's request. For the purpose of this demonstration, the official clicks approve and a pop-up appears confirming that Mylan is now a valid user of the platform. Mylan is able to view the product listing by clicking on the tab on the left panel. The user can also search for other products through the search bar. Since Mylan also wants to access Sidzium Travancorium, the user clicks on serial 5 added by provider Mr. Koshi and then clicks on request for PIC and MAT. As in India's case, a PIC and MAT are the same. A PIC and MAT request form pops up, in which details pertaining to the quantity of the resource, benefit sharing parameters, etc. are captured. Mylan fills this form and submits it for approval. India Competent National Authority is notified with a notification on the right corner of the page as well as on the left panel in its landing page. The official clicks on either of these notifications and reviews the PIC and MAT request updated by the user Mylan. The official reviews crucial aspects such as net benefit to be shared, which in this case is 2% of ex-factory gross sales. The official also conducts an offline conversation with Mr. Koshi to ensure provider consent. Finally, the official clicks approve. And a pop-up appears confirming that the PIC and MAT request is approved by competent national authority and is submitted to publishing authority for final approval.
Thank you so much, Afshar, for this, for guiding us through the product that has been developed by your team as project team leader in this effort made by PricewaterhouseCoopers, the two teams in Turkey in collaboration with the team also in India. And just let me clarify that the video that we have seen is just a demo of what it should be the product once, if it is developed, no? So it was just a demo to visualize how the system will work in practical terms. And as we have seen, at the end of the day, it's true, is a database, right? Where we rely on blockchain to follow all these different steps. There are different questions in the Q&A chat box relevant to the presentation that you just made, and I'm sure we will have time to go through those different questions. But before doing that, let's move on to the panel session. And first of all, we will have you, Afshar, as a panelist, but let me very quickly introduce the other two panelists that will be with us today. First of all, Dr. Mathur, Chairperson of the National Biodiversity Authority of India. Dr. Mathur, how are you?
I'm fine.
I thank you so much, because I know you are extremely busy, and there is also another IPES meeting going on, and you are jumping from one meeting to another. We thank you so much for the effort, Dr. Mathur. And we also have Nicolette Swart, who has been supporting the Global ABS project in putting together and launching this collaboration with Pricewaterhouse and trying to make a proper design of this test of blockchain. How, Nicolette, how are you?
Yes, I'm fine. I'm very excited to be part of this project. It's amazing.
Fantastic. As a first round, the three of you, do you want to make an initial introduction of yourselves and the connection or the potential that you see regarding this blockchain pilot test? Who wants to start? Dr. Mathur, you want to open the discussion a bit?
Okay. Thank you. I'll do that. See, I would begin by saying that I am a great believer of technology. That is the first thing, because belief is very, very important. And I must also share with you that about 4 months back, when on one late evening we had a presentation by your team, during our college days, we used to use a phrase called overhead transmission. Everything went over the head. Whatever your colleagues were saying, nothing, or maybe 10% of what we could absorb or I could absorb. I'll be very candid. But today, the presentation by Afsar and this little video has made a complete difference in what can be achieved, what needs to be done, and where we are. See, we need to look at, and Afsar, I really liked your diagram on problem synthesis. See, you are all management people, professional managers. I do practice. So I do understand the importance of what is called as a problem statement, and your problem synthesis is near perfect. So once you are able to define, and that shows your experience. So that shows that all aspects of the hindrances that we are going to face have been indicated and captured. And we now need to collectively find a solution to that. Why I said that I'm a believer of technology, because if I don't believe, even if you show me everything, I will again say, no, this cannot be done. So there would be hardly any person in this world who does not understand what is a transaction. And especially, Afsar, when you talked about a financial transaction. Everybody understands you can't live, you can't buy anything without understanding or performing a transaction. But when it comes to ecological transaction, our problem starts. So what we are basically trying to do, if I have understood you correctly, that we are trying to build up the principles of financial transactions, and we are trying to take it to the way in which ecology operates. And in your ways, you have made it a little more simpler. See, this video has simplified a few things, because when you say a product, in a marketing parlance, a product is well defined. But in an ecological parlance, the product is also not well defined. The product can have large number of ingredients. And when we are talking of access and benefit sharing, we need to go to each and every ingredient, identify it, map it, tag it, track it. Then only the cycle will get completed. So the point I'm making is that from the theoretical construct, there is nothing where I find that this technology will not work. It will work. What is problematic or what can be challenging is to create an inventory, to create a system, and to take this technology to a grassroots level. In the video, you have defined that competent national authority. Well, I am the competent national authority, but I cannot operate till all the lower rungs below me are also part of the system. So we have a lot of more work to do. The good part is we know what is that work. And in this project, and if Alejandro is able to find out some pot of money, obviously time is money. It will require, you can put experts. We need to do that. What I can assure you is the buy-in. And which is what you said, that there has to be buy-in of the government. And I can, with this interaction, take it to my bosses, because I am also answerable to somebody, and say that trust us. If I trust Afsar and people and PwC, they would trust me and allow us to run this pilot. Only time will tell, because timelines are important and we need to set up a realistic timeline. What is difficult for me to understand at this point, that normally when we use a pilot is a small part of the whole. But in this blockchain technology, can we really run a pilot if all our entities are not part of the transaction? So that is a question which we need to answer. We need to define and redefine that. So scalability will remain an issue. Inventorization will remain an issue. But your technology is there. We need to put up our own mechanisms in tagging it and tracking it. So see, three things are important. Tagging is important. Tracking is important. Transparency is important. Because we want to make, these are, as you would like to do in your financial transaction, you would also like to do it in an ecological transaction, that things are transparent. Who is the conserver of the resource? Who is the beneficiary? From whom the money is going? What is that amount? But for these three T's, tagging, tracking, and transparency, technology is the answer. There is no doubt in my mind that technology can help us to tag, to track, to make our operations transparent. The other problem is a larger problem. I must spell it out to you. You have used it in your language. Is the state of digital maturity. See, the state of digital maturity is different. It is different within country. It is also different within country. In our provinces, it is different. But I can share with you that the government of India is committed for a digital India. So this activity and this pilot of ours fits in the minds of the top political leadership, that if India is to move, we need to move very quickly. And I must share with you that we have moved. The pandemic may be wrong, may be bad for several reasons. But one thing has happened in the last 18 months, that India has really ramped up its digital maturity. Otherwise, neither the vaccination would have been possible, nor the ramping up would have been possible. So we have examples from a related sector. We now need to see that how we translate and bring the basic principles to ecology and biodiversity. I will stop here, but these were my initial reactions, and I listened very carefully to you, Afsar. And I have made my own notes over here, and I feel very comfortable. I was very uncomfortable 4 months back when in one evening, you recall, Alejandro, you fixed up a meeting. We were not knowing what this technology is, and we were hearing the presentation. But I must compliment you and your team that in 4 months' time, you have covered a lot of ground. We still need to cover a lot, but yes, we are on track. So I'll stop here, but wait if you have any responses to what I have said.
Sure. A few comments very quickly. First of all, thanks a lot. The synthesis, the problem synthesis was actually done by our India team, because we had budget constraints, and due to COVID, the travel restrictions, I couldn't come to India, but thanks to Christina Kulan, Saurabh, and all that team, they did the hard work. So I shouldn't be taking the credit just on my own. My job was easy. But coming to a couple of points you made, on blockchain, we just don't do financial transactions only. There are non-financial transactions as well. So when IRCC request comes to you, it is a transaction as well. So there will be certain elements in there. So that's why I was saying at the beginning, the webinar has a simple question: can blockchain help traceability of ABS? Yes, it can, but it can do more. It can do a lot more than that. And coming to technology, this is something, because I work in the tech sector for a long time, and I always explain this to people. If you're doing a technological intervention, you need to make the life of the users simpler than how it was prior to the technological implementation put in place. And we saw that in artificial intelligence implementations that it hasn't really made life any easier for the users. And I can give you examples of doctors trying to put data into an artificial intelligence engine in English language just because the natural language processing engine only understands English language. So a doctor in Puerto Rico, a doctor in France could not possibly use these technological solutions. So coming to blockchain, what we are trying to focus is there is a workflow which is currently paper-based. So there's a bureaucracy element, a red tape element. Can we make this simpler? And if yes, how can we make it? So that's where the buy-in of agencies like yours come to play. So we hope we address them in the design, but when the actual product is developed, hopefully the users at your agency and local agencies and other users, in fact, I see a lot of questions in there. Why didn't we consider indigenous populations as a user? We did not ignore them. They're part of the game. It's just we don't know what the digital maturity of it is. So maybe we can tackle that in this session too. Many stakeholders can join the protocol, Nagoya Protocol and blockchain implementation. And we aim to make the workflow simpler and more accessible, transparent. So hopefully once all the financial issues are solved in respect to funding, and then the pilot starts, product development starts, we will be able to see the fruit of our labor.
Well, thank you so much for this initial exchange. If those were your initial remarks, I cannot wait to see the details, Dr. Mathur, because you in my view, exhausted everything, but in just your first round. But thank you so much. Now let me move to Nicolette. And Nicolette, you are a lawyer with experience on agribusiness in particular and blockchain technology. Can you tell us what was your interest in this project and how see the possibilities, no, that are around this technology in this particular theme of access and benefit sharing?
Yeah, sure, I will. Dr. Matur actually spoke to my heart because everything he said was at the beginning of this project my focus, because I, as Alejandro said, I assisted UNDP in the design of the terms of reference.
A little louder, please.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'll sit a little bit closer. Maybe you can hear it better then. I began with you spoke to my heart, so let me say that again. Because everything you said actually was at the basis of our whole terms of reference and the design thereof. So we looked at how can we get a partner that in the end was PwC, but how can they build something that will be very innovative and with a focus on the entire value chain. As you said, it is quite confusing technology, blockchain. I had some background in it in Oxford University blockchain business strategy, so especially for business. And I saw that a lot of businesses are very eager to do something with it, but well, a little bit reluctant because of the lack of regulation. So then when we started this project, we said, well, it must be interesting and appealing, not only for UNDP or government, but also for business, but especially for the whole value chain for indigenous countries and for indigenous communities. So what a real focus was that we have to create a level playing field. So we have to have transparency throughout the whole value chain. And in that way, create a level playing field, which of course is not so easy if you're considering digital maturity, not only in India, but globally. But on the other hand, UNDP was already so far in the ABS project in at least assessing the digital maturity everywhere. So we could build on that. And PwC actually did that very well. So what we looked at was the public-private potential. How can we make governments happy? Well, and that's why you spoke to my heart, because at first you didn't understand, but now you say it would actually be something really good for the Indian government, and we hope that that applies for other governments as well. But also it has to be very interesting for the private sector, of course, because if you actually want sustainable development, you need to include the private sector, who will be the ones actually using the genetic materials and the traditional knowledge of countries. So that was the focus in the whole project with the design of the terms of reference. And well, we certainly hope that we will get the chance to build out this pilot on the basis of the whole plan, because I think the plan is really integrated. So that was my introduction, Alejandro.
Thank you so much, Nicolette. And linking to also your point on covering the entire value chain, I would like to go back to Afshar and ask, but also to you, Nicolette, and also to Dr. Mathur, how do you think the private sector might benefit from tracking and application of ABS processes, no? Along with the public sector? How you see that benefit? How you see that the private sector going into this? No?
Ladies first.
Well, of course, we already discussed the bureaucracy part, so it will take away a lot of bureaucracy. I saw examples, for instance, from the World Food Programme, where it took away 89% of the whole bureaucracy and transaction fees. With I will not go into that example, but I can share it with whomever it wants it. So that would be a very good thing. That's of course World Food Programme, but the same bureaucracy problem applies even more so for the private sector. It would be an incentive, of course, to comply with this treaty obligation, which is an obligation, maybe not felt by everyone at this time, but well, private sector and institutes using genetic materials have to comply with the Nagoya Protocol. So this could actually be an extra incentive. I have a whole list, so I don't want to take away any arguments of the other two, but so just pitch in whenever you want, because this actually is one of my pet child. It is, of course, corporate social responsibility for a lot of companies. I think one of the most interesting things could be, but that's really the innovative part, that there could be market creation bottom up, so grassroots, throughout the gene pool variety. So if you give smallholder farmers the chance, as this proposal does, to actually list their genetic materials and their traditional knowledge, they could, if they would really be included in a good way, they could actually create a whole new market for themselves as entrepreneurs, which of course for the private sector would mean a bit bigger gene pool variety, which is, I think, very interesting for most companies. And another thing is, most of the time with blockchain, many companies find it very interesting to sit first row in the blockchain technology development, because of the lack of regulation. I'm following that, of course, as a lawyer. Most companies don't even try to get too far in the whole blockchain space, because, well, some government could somehow someday say we don't want this, we regulate it. So then everything will fall into pieces. And it is a very good incentive for companies to sit first row in UNDP or World Food Programme or other FAO supranational organizations who are actually not really bound to the national governments, at least not all of them. So they can choose where to do the pilot and at what time, because the lack of regulation is something that is going very fast. Companies or governments are actually making regulation as we speak, but no one really knows what will happen the next day. So that's a good thing to already have a sort of sandbox with this supranational organization. So that I think is one of the most important arguments for private sector to be involved right now in this sort of public space for the Nagoya Protocol. Now I stop.
And let me add a few points. During this project, we actually interacted with some of the private sector speakers, members. So usually when you focus on pharmaceutical industry, the first private sector that comes to your mind is the big pharma. But in essence, even primary producers, their distributors, importers and exporters, they could be a part of the value chain and represent private sector interests as well. So the main benefit that they would get out of this is, and I'm reporting the interactions we made, is most big pharma actually has a compliance officer for Nagoya Protocol, and their principal complaint is they don't get a response for a request. So they want to access a genetic material and they connect various government agencies, but there are no counterparts that could actually respond to them. So in the bottlenecks, we identified as delays, but in their sense, it's not delay, it's actually no outcome at all. So there sits a compliance officer and they can't get anything done. So a blockchain-based solution ready to be deployed could probably solve this, because we can then take this to many counterparts and say, hey, here is a tool that you can quickly look and request help, request information. And we need to look into these in actual pilot implementation, but the use case that was described over there was this drug company was trying to develop animal vaccines for food and mouth disease, and they wanted to collect as many mutations of that virus around the world as possible, meaning they need to have people on the ground that can go and collect blood samples or whatever virus samples that they collect from the animals. And they work with national competent authorities. This could be ministries of agriculture or whatever, because this time the particle genetic material is not an endangered species, it's actually a virus. So they need to have some people who are probably on motorcycles going from farm to farm, collecting the samples, bringing them to a central collection unit, and then shipping it all the way to the labs where they're going to get the cocktail vaccine with the new variants ready. So these are the type of things that the private sector will probably appreciate, especially if the benefit sharing starts from the first level, not from the commercialization of the product. The company, the drug company, is actually willing to provide money to the local government authorities to mobilize people to go to the farms and to collect the virus samples. And they're happy to put funding for it. So if we could put this benefit sharing mechanism into the blockchain, they will probably immediately embrace this and say, okay, here's now a tool that I can quickly make a request and then get the best available vaccine genetic material on a routine basis, because they need to do this year round. They need to do this every year for development of new vaccines. So this is one case, but that is big pharma. Then we also have small businesses. So primary producers are also a private sector. And depending on their digital maturity, we actually did a lot of brainstorming with the technical team in India. There needs to be some mobile interface for this, where you could quickly register a genetic material that you produce. It could be a plant species or an animal specimen onto the database that we have. And their main mode of interaction will most likely be a mobile application. And here you go. Here's a mobile application that you can quickly register your genetic material and put it through, and then hopefully it will be picked up by a private enterprise who would like to commercialize this, and then the benefits will come to you in the long run. So I believe having the solution ready will open grounds for many participants, be it private sector or public sector, that they can do things a lot smoother, hassle-free, easily, operational workflows all simplified with a technological intervention.
And you refer to, Dr. Mathur, you want to add something on this point?
Yeah, I just want to add a new dimension that, and this is my intervention is largely in the context of India, that our urban and rural markets are very different. The buyers are different, the sellers are different, the products are different. So I foresee that as we start creating these databases for the application of blockchain, this divide between the urban markets and the rural markets will be bridged, and it will create more and more opportunities for people with a range of raw material to be sold in markets, and for the companies to tap those resources to know about their availability. So I see for some as a business opportunity. How much they will be able to harness it will depend upon the efforts, and there will be a spin-off benefit in the context of ABS. Because if our laws are very clear, if anybody uses a biological resource, some part or some proportion has to be paid as ABS. Right now, because there is no detection mechanism, there is no traceability, so nothing we know who is doing what is being traded, who is benefiting, who is losing. But I foresee in years to come, as we move along in this direction of building up our blockchains, all these things will come up in a way where traceability will happen. And if traceability happens, rest of the thing will follow. So I see a kind of a win-win for everyone. Industry should not feel shy that this is some mechanism on the part of the government to arm twist them. That is not the case. The law already exists. We will be efficiently implementing it. So it will be in the larger interest of the ABS community globally. I'll stop here.
Thank you so much. And you refer during your interventions to technical and regulatory or even legal considerations, no, to implement this. So could you please summarize what are, in your view, the key technical, regulatory, and legal considerations to take into account for the pilot implementation? Don't be shy.
Technology is not a however nice and good the blockchain technology is, there will be no substitute for the pick and mat. They will exist. All you would do is you will computerize them. You will make those agreements visible, transparent, and you will know the quantum and nature of that. So technical issue is with relate to that. If somebody believes that by getting this technology, we will get rid of pick and mat, I don't think so. That is going to happen. That may not be the intention also, but that is what I need to say. And then, as I said earlier, this blockchain has to operate at multiple tiers. And that to me is a challenge. Having one competent national authority, me sitting in one city, is not enough. The operations are multiple. They are taking place at various levels. So we need to look at how the blockchain technology will pan out to from the national to the regional to the subnational and to the lowest level of governance. So that will be again a kind of a challenge which is there. And if there is a hiccup in any of those stages, then your global ABS tracker cannot work. So we need to be very careful, and therefore our rollout, I'm sure in a few months' time we'll be talking of a rollout also. The rollout has to look into that we have been able to capture all elements of that. Because if some element is missing, then in reality, the blockchain doesn't work. It will get stuck at some stage. It will not be able to identify the conserver with the user, with the trader, and with the beneficiary. Mm-hmm. So that is a kind of challenges that we have, and we need to work to fix them up. I'll stop here. Mm-hmm. But Nicola, might I like to come in?
Nico, I'll tackle the technical barriers, you tackle the regulatory barriers, huh?
Okay, that's good. That's a good arrangement. With regard to the legal aspects, as I already said, it's all the time different depending on which country you look at, and of course also whether you look at the blockchain technology as such or the cryptocurrencies, which is only an application on the blockchain technology, which people most of the time confuse with each other. And at this time, especially the cryptocurrencies part is something that's really being considered differently by separate governments. There are well, more and more governments who are actually putting regulations on that, understandably. But at the same time, it makes the space very insecure. So apart from the normal regulatory things like that are related to ABS, which were already there, they're all included in this whole design, but there are also outside of the ABS regulations to be taken into consideration of separate countries, especially in the rollout, and then also in the funding part. So I cannot say really anything at this time, because if I would it would be maybe outdated even in a month or so. So that would not be very smart to do, but it is something we should look into very carefully.
So if I can add a little bit on technical barriers, one positive attribute of blockchain technology is most of the code is open source. So you have GitHub type of repositories where you can go and fork the code and get implementations from developers who have already contributed to the project. So development part and writing the smart contracts is relatively easy, but the part that is difficult is testing, because testing, if you're working in a central client-server architecture, you can easily test and find all the bugs. But in a decentralized environment, certain problems do not occur until you hit them. And when you hit them could be sometime in the distant future. So most of the blockchain protocols have suffered from these errors or bugs that have hit them later down the track, although all the tests during the initial development phase were completed. And the other technical issue is, and I think this was also addressed by one of the attendees' question in the chat box, what sort of architecture will this be on? Will it be public permissioned or public permissionless, private permissioned or private permissionless? That will depend on the governance board's decision. We looked at it, and as I've explained, there's no owner of this. Everyone, like governments and private sector, could be part of this. It's not a government-owned solution. So we believe it's going to be a public permissioned one, but we can't decide on it yet. But we put these options in our report when it comes to discussion. And it also depends on how you finance it. If you're going to finance it through stakeholders, where those stakeholders are predominantly enterprises, then it will most likely be a private permission solution, because they will require certain privacy and data protection laws to be observed, especially for sensitive data remaining onshore. But if it's a crowd-funded option where certain benefits can be shared more freely across a larger population base, then it will most likely be a public blockchain. So that is, in a nutshell, the technical barriers that we will have. One last point is I explained we also looked at other technologies surrounding this. So it's not just blockchain, but there are sister technologies, adjacent technologies, that ingredients that we need to put in, like QR codes, like geo-identifiers, because coming to think of it, in a blockchain solution, when you transfer value, there will be a number of crypto assets registered there. For example, it may appear as a database entry for an IRCC, but the primary product there could well be a non-fungible token with a geographical identifier and a traditional knowledge attached to it. So 2-3 elements may make it unique, that it may not be a fungible token. But when the commercialization of that primary material is done by a pharmaceutical or a cosmetic enterprise, and then the benefit sharing comes to play, then that benefit, the commercial benefit I'm talking here, will be on a fungible token. So we refer to that as most likely a stable coin infrastructure, if it is legal in a country, and maybe later down the track, it will be a central bank digital currency. And we don't know how they will happen. Will they be a blockchain-based one, or will it be just a digital ledger entry with one central authority having a control? But these are considerations, technical considerations, that will come together with regulatory oversight. Like Nicolette mentioned, whatever we say today might be redundant in a month's time. And it's such an evolving technology. A month ago, Bitcoin was not recognized by any country as a legal tender, and then El Salvador did. So this is how fast the pace of implementations of blockchain and cryptocurrencies are. And we need to be watchful of what's happening in the ground, on the ground.
just also linking with your point on one of the main challenges to move into the implementation phase is how to get the necessary financial resources, no, to implement. And you mentioned already the two options, the two models that you present, no, in your proposal. One, the stakeholder funded, more classic approach, if you want, and the crowd-funded approach, no. What benefits? I mean, you have already introduced and explained some of the benefits and risks that you see in the two models. Nicolette, how you see the two options, and again, what you see as the main benefits or challenges in regard to those two options, no? The stakeholder funded or the crowd-funded approach.
Yes, well, dependent, of course, on the regulatory status on a certain moment. I think both options could be very interesting with regard to the crowdsourcing or the crowdfunding, I'm sorry. Crowdfunding option, you would really have to rely on regulation in a certain country, and that could be a very interesting option if it's permitted by the government, because then you would have a very big pool of people already included in the whole idea, and a level playing field as such, because it doesn't matter whether a company would enter into the game or someone from an indigenous community, even only if they have access to some digital device, they could already be part of the whole solution, which I believe is a very nice way of looking at this whole project. Because if you're talking about the stakeholder funding option, that normally doesn't really involve funding from the grassroots level, because they, of course, they will be included in the whole solution, but it will be funded for them by the people from the top of the pyramid, to put it very shortly. But at the same time, with the stakeholder model, there will be more in buy-in from governments and also from the corporate world if you do it in the right way. So that's an advantage as well. So you can go both ways. It depends on the legal side, but also it depends on what would be acceptable within UNDP and what would be acceptable, of course, within the pilot. And with the crowdfunding model, you can have a lot of, but that's something Afsar can tell more about. You could have a bigger pot of money, as Dr. Matour said, and if there's a pot of money and you can actually implement the whole thing very fast, that's the best option, of course, because then you will be on top of the game, and there are a lot of interested parties that will still want to follow. Whereas if you are later on, there are some of the incentives I just listed before, they would be gone already, because then the private sector has already have their own solutions, and maybe they're not really in compliance with the whole ABS system, to put it mildly. They could do their own stuff to avoid bureaucracy, and what we want is to have a whole integrative system in which everyone benefits, and it would be a win-win.
Dr. Mathur, I know you have to leave us as you need to move into the plenary session of the Intergovernmental Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services. You want to, we are going to move into Q&A, but I think most of the questions are more technical. Do you want to have any final thought before you leave us and you move to the other meeting?
My final thoughts, Alejandro, are very straightforward. We want this pilot to happen. We want to partner with this pilot, and we need to have the benefit of the expertise of people like Afsar and Nicolai, so that our learning curve is achievable. And I feel that the government should take it as an investment. Investment in a process, investment in a technical infrastructure. I give you an example. The entire income tax, which everybody pays in his or her government, is a computerized process now. Hundreds and millions of rupees have been spent in that, in the development part of it. But now it is giving its return. Because our taxpayers' base has expanded, we can now understand from where the funds are coming from and where they are not coming from, who is evading, who is paying. So what kind of incentive or disincentive systems we need to build? I'm talking like a finance minister, but yes, that is what our finance minister has done. So same thing, if I talk as my environment minister, we need to pick up, we need to partner. Of course, if these projects are initially funded through a donor mechanism like you are doing it or you're planning to do it, it will be helpful because somebody has to pay the development cost. But I personally feel that government buy-in is very important. And because if the government doesn't step in, a country like India, it cannot be digitally converted. We are not talking of one municipality or we are not talking of one town where somebody may come in and say that here is a $50,000, you please go and do that. We are talking of huge. And then these databases are of biological resource where prices will also fluctuate. New products will be added. So I would like, at least for our country, if we can do a kind of a development, we can do a kind of a real-time project, demonstrate some benefits coming out of it, then take it to the government and say that this is it. And that's where I come into picture as a National Biodiversity Authority, as an environment regulator for use of biological resource. When we recommend and when we say that the system is very helpful, it is helping us in so many ways. It is easing out the processing of applications. It is also helping us in tracing the benefits coming from, and it is identifying where our gap areas are. So surely the buy-in will have to be of the government. The initial funding and operation will be of the government. And I can say of India that our administrative structures are pretty well defined. So it will not be very difficult. We can do a little piggyback riding on something, but eventually for a complete countrywide layout, the buy-in of the government will be very, very important. So I will end here, but I would like to assure our resource persons, you and everybody who's listening, that we look forward to harnessing, be part of the development first. You would recall our colleagues from PwC, they traveled from Bangalore to Chennai, had meetings with us, basically to improve our understanding. And we strongly believe that a product of this nature has to be jointly developed. You can't just develop it in your own labs and say, this is it. So we have to be, we are willing to partner it. We are willing to spend our time and whatever intellectual input we can, but we want to see it happen. There may be some timelines. We are prepared to wait, not to rush, but that is the technology for future. I will stop here, Alejandro.
Dr. Mathur, thank you so much, because you have been extremely generous with the project, and we have benefited, particularly this week, from your presence 3 days in a row. No, yesterday in the publication, in the book launch of the ABS Theory to Practice, and the previous day also in the steering committee, the final meeting of the steering committee of the project. You are a big ABS champion. So therefore, we just have to thank you for your kind support during all the project. You have made a difference, and you know that it's our intention to make this a reality, this pilot. So we will continue working together, and it's always a pleasure to have you.
Alejandro, I have a question. What kind of a timeline are you thinking of for this pilot? I want to hear, beyond your project, which is ending in June. What kind of timelines you have in mind?
That's a very good question. The project ended yesterday, actually, no? The first phase of the project. We are on an extra time today. Actually, this webinar is outside the initial phase. UNDP has kindly approved a kind of transition phase. So the project continues. The global ABS community will continue for 5 months. We have obtained 5 months to make a proposal for a second phase. And one of the components for the proposal of a second phase is the implementation of this pilot project to test blockchain technology on ABS in India, no? As developed by our colleagues from Pricewaterhouse. No? So the idea would be in the next couple of months to finalize that proposal, and in the following months to mobilize donors, no? To contact, approach different donors and see what are the possibilities to fund the different components of that second phase. No? So basically,
so my last, thank you for that. My last words to Alejandro, you, to UNDP, and to PwC, count us in. We are with you in the development of this project, and we want to make it, take it forward and make it a reality. Thank you very much. And
what we want to do, Dr. Mathur,
yes,
if you allow me, is to organize regional meetings to talk not only with countries, but also with the stakeholders at the regional level to detect the needs that the main needs that stakeholders, governments have, and what kind of actions can be promoted, no, by the project. And we want to conduct that kind of regional meetings in the next couple of weeks. So keep the momentum, gather all this information, and move that information into a concrete proposal and to approach donors. We think this is a crucial year for biodiversity, being the super year for biodiversity 2020 postponed to 2021 due to the pandemic. No, many decisions, as you are following IPES and also the CBD COP, no, need to be taken. So I think the window of opportunity is there to also push, no, with these projects, the implementation of the Nagoya Protocol and ABS. No?
So I have 2 more suggestions. We should start thinking in terms of a side event whenever international meetings are happening. If they happen physically in 6 months' time, whatever, it will be good to take it out and organize a joint event with your team and with India, that India is moving ahead with ABS blockchain, and to whatever levels we have reached, we can share that. And to my colleagues in PwC, if they want an office space in my office, they are most welcome to do that. Thank you.
Don't tell them, they will occupy your office tomorrow, you know?
I don't mind, my work will move faster.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mathur. Thank you so much. It's always a pleasure
I'll take leave from here. Okay?
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Colleagues, let me connect with the questions, and actually in regard to the last point that we were addressing, the crowdfunding, there was a comment. Let me go through the questions that I saw is related regarding whether this was question. One moment. What's the question now? Apologies for this. How does it work? Yes, here we are. By crowdsourcing, are the speakers, sorry, making an oblique reference to governance token sale? So crowdsourcing among governments? If not, is it some other kind of token, and what rights does it confer?
Yeah, it's a good question. Usually when we discuss crowdfunding, we don't consider governments, but individuals. So you take a small amount from believers of the project, and then widely collected from large numbers of people. So you end up with a substantial amount to fund the project. So the idea was similar to initial coin offerings, and a couple of things that is worth mentioning. There is as much as countries have different legislative regulatory restrictions on it, a project in India doesn't have to be funded by Indians. It could be funded by a global crowdfunding user base. So just ballpark figures, for a project this size, the actual product cost, we measured a minimum viable product to be somewhere to the tune of 300K to maybe $500,000K, and then a full-blown enterprise-grade product to be $1.5 million. And with pilot implementation, it would go to 3 million because you need to do the coalface work. But to fully scale this and have a sustainable source of funding, you would generally require 10 times the amount of that. So it's 3 million, you need to aim for $32 million because you have only one bullet to shoot. So you will do the initial token offering, and then you'll have the sum, and then it needs to take you all the way for a number of years to fully implement this across countries, across industries, not just pharmaceuticals. So when you look at a ballpark figure of $32 million, usually with crowdfunding, the contributions used to be anything from $100 to $1,000. So you need to tap on to roughly 30,000 individuals to 320,000 individuals. But what happens is, usually when you put up your white paper, so we said you need to publish this, either the terms of reference of the white paper, then you add a tokenomic model into it. You might do a private sale or pre-sale where institutions can participate. So these could be your usual suspects, like the pharmaceutical companies, for example, stepping in and participating, and the bilaterals, multilaterals, if they are interested, because we do know some blockchain and crowdfunding implementations among international development partners. So that, in a nutshell, is what we're aiming for. And one thing that is worth mentioning, crowdfunding versus stakeholder funding, is I have been on both sides of the table. So I used to work for UN agencies, World Health Organization and ILO in particular. And we used to broker funds from the likes of bilaterals, multilaterals, Global Fund, Global Alliance for Vaccines and Immunizations. So there are many stakeholders, many charitable institutions. In fact, one of my roles was funded by the Archduke of Luxembourg in Vietnam. So there was a royalty who had funding, and he gave the money to Asian Development Bank for a project in Vietnam. The problem we have right now is because of COVID, the overseas development assistance budgets of governments have been slashed, because the economies have contracted significantly. So when you already have a situation where even the richer governments are struggling for making the ends meet, you have a situation where the priority is still post-COVID mitigation of economic damage that has happened. So most of the ODA funds that can be brokered by UN agencies, including UNDP, Nagoya Protocol will not stand on the top of the list. It will be more COVID. That's why we're saying that as much as it's good to go with a stakeholder funding model, tapping on governments, on bilaterals, multilaterals, private sector, it will take a long time to get their mind share and their willingness to commit to those funds. Whereas a nicely vetted project, crowdfunding ready project that is launched through a credible partner, and we do not have central entities who have specialized in initial token offerings, security offerings, coin offerings, who could vet the projects and market it to the target audience in such a smoothness fashion that you can quickly find the money that you need, not just for the current fiscal year, but for 5 years, 10 years down the track. That's why we would like this audience to put serious concentration into why it might be more viable to go through the crowdfunding approach. Because most of the projects that are currently being funded are speculative in nature, and they are criticized by some hardcore economists like Joseph Stiglitz saying these are not doing any socially useful function, especially talking about cryptocurrencies. But Nagoya Protocol has many socially useful functions that you can put into its token economic framework. And it could stand out among all the technology mumbo jumbo that goes in. Our technology does this transaction better. It's more decentralized. So these are the current narrative that you hear. But if you put Nagoya Protocol and ABS into the token economic model and vet it with a credible partner, I believe in such a short time, we can find the money, and that money doesn't have to come from the country where the first pilot will be implemented.
Thank you so much. Well, I've seen that we have lots of questions, and we will try to address some of them. Impossible to cover all of them, but at least some of them in the remaining 10-15 minutes. And this question, I think, goes more to Nicolette, no? Because it's true that the Nagoya Protocol and access and benefit sharing tries to cover both monetary and non-monetary benefit sharing, right? And it seems that with blockchain, probably because it's related to cryptocurrencies, it seems that we are focusing only on monetary benefit sharing. But the question is whether smart contracts can cover both monetary and non-monetary benefit sharing.
Yes. Smart is a good question, but it's not only monetary. You can have smart contracts on the blockchain, and in the smart contracts are nothing really else than just a developer's tool. It's just a normal contract like you have as a lawyer, but now it's coded. So you can code whatever you want into a smart contract, and it could also be, and also the documents that are normally used in ABS will be as a smart contract on the blockchain. So in these documents, there are also the other transactions, so not monetary transactions, and those are only put on the blockchain. That's a technical part, but it can be done. Yes, it's just it doesn't matter whether it's monetary or non-monetary.
Both will be covered, right? Both will be covered, right? And this also goes with some questions that we have seen at the beginning, no? Regarding how to define users, who are providers, these kind of questions. Of course, blockchain is going to rely, and this tool, this platform is going to rely on nationalization, no? So it's not going to solve or to address those questions. Those questions will need to be addressed by the nationalization, no? The potential is that this tool may standardize some of those procedures and also may standardize some of those nationalizations, no? Which can be an added value, but indirect, no? The system will rely and will respect the nationalization, no? In order to introduce all this information. And as already mentioned and highlighted by Dr. Mathur and by Afshar as well, pick and mat will be still the basic starting point, no? The negotiation at the national level of the pick and mat, no? And regarding to that, there is a question also, what if a user transfers a genetic resource without registering on the blockchain? How will this violation be detected?
You mean the user, the one who's actually providing the genetic materials? Because that would be not in his or her own interest to not register it on the blockchain, because that will in the end give them the access to benefit sharing if they register on the blockchain. So of course they could do anything outside of the blockchain, like they now could do anything outside Nagoya Protocol or the ABS regulations, but it would not be in their own interest to do so, because then the benefits will not come to them in the end. If you're talking about the user, of course, if you are talking about the one who's actually not the provider, so this might be the provider where the question is about, and the user would be the one who's actually using the genetic materials. And of course, that cannot be totally arranged in a way that there is no fraud possible, like it's now, like it's always, because if you have a technology system, people can always go beside. So that's in this case not very different.
And I may add a point. This already happens without the blockchain. In fact, it was reported by one of our workshop participants I think it was Costa Rica, that was doing a research on an endangered shark species with researchers in Panama. And they only found out that those specimens from the shark was being collected after the academic researchers had published that academic report. So it already happens. But what blockchain can help with is there are checkpoints. So if, say, a particular genetic material is not registered by primary producer, or it's not being registered by the final user, but it goes through a checkpoint, like through a port authority, and they identify that it belongs to a genetic material, and they report on a checkpoint that there's one material that is shipped from one sender to a recipient, and there is no entry in the blockchain with respect to that. So we may be able to at least capture some of these things on the checkpoint communique tools. So it all depends on how the business rules will be written for this project later down the track. That's why the technology is there to help, but we don't know everything under the sun. Only we can tell that whatever that problem is, it already exists without the blockchain, and it will become more transparent, more visible once blockchain comes, so it will gradually disappear. At least we are hoping that it will gradually disappear.
And another question is whether this system could cover digital sequence information, which is a hot issue, as you know, at the Nagoya Protocol discussions at the international level, no?
For humans or for animal species, plants?
Humans human genetic resources are outside the convention, no? So in principle, we are not referring to that.
Yeah, it's probably. One thing, we discussed this in one of the workshops. If there is sensitive information, it can stay in a recognized authority, a reliable centralized authority as is, and only the changes made to that database could be registered on the blockchain, meaning people cannot access that information without the central authorities or the governing body of those authorities' access. You do not need to put everything on a blockchain, plus blockchain is not very efficient. I mean, centralized databases are more efficient. That's why we generally just put transaction data. So it would be nice to have some cloud-based collaboration where different genomic data sequencing data from around the world is available in various repositories where researchers could access. And that way, I'm not just talking about commercial benefits here, but non-commercial, like academic research thing. But there will be some countries who will be very restrictive, protective of their information. So we don't have a bulletproof solution for this, but if the data is sensitive, it doesn't have to be shared. What can be shared is the location of that data and any changes made to that data, any additions, any new sequencing information, any new variants. So these can be probably put onto the blockchain, whereas the ownership of the data is still retained with a central authority who's the custodian of that data and who can share that data at their free will based on other workflows than blockchain.
Well, thank you very much for that. I think we are reaching the end of this webinar, and I would like to ask you a simple or kind of simple and general question, but an important one, no? That is related to the risks. If you have seen in your work during these 4 months developing this, designing this pilot project, what kind of risk have you detected that could be in place when you apply blockchain technology to ABS?
Ladies first.
I thought this typically would be one you could do, Afsar, because this is extensively written in the report. So,
sure. Well, I mean, the risk of not doing anything is also risk, and we might end up losing Nagoya Protocol to oblivion if some of the concerns that were raised by participants say nothing is happening. We're applying. I'm a compliance officer from this drug company. I'm requesting this. No central authority, national competent authority is replying to my request. So we already have a risk where if nothing is done, we will end up with a nice protocol that has been ratified by many countries, not operationalizing the actual benefits of it. So we need some technological intervention, and for that reason, it's a risk that is worth taking, in my opinion. Obviously, there are risks. We covered regulatory risks, there are technical barriers and all that, but I think on a cost-benefit scale, doing nothing is probably more costly than doing something.
Thank you so much. Colleagues, Afsar, Nicolette, any final remarks that you want to make?
Only that I'm very happy that there were so many participants, because I think a subject like this is not really easy to grasp. So I'm very happy with the interest for this, and I'm looking forward to continuing the whole thing, because, well, I think it's really innovative and really necessary.
And I'd like to thank the India team. They were working hard while Nicolette and I were answering the questions here. I'll look at all the open questions are probably answered by them. Hopefully no participant is left without an answer. So thanks very much, India team. And thanks a lot for listening to us. And looking forward for the next.
You read my mind. You anticipated my point. I was going to thank, in particular, the colleagues in India, Chrissy, Sani, and Nakulan, just because they have been at the background answering most of the questions. Let me also indicate in general terms that, again, this webinar was not to solve all the issues, and the approach of this pilot project to test blockchain. We are not going to be able to solve all the issues on ABS. And that's why we have not entered into some questions regarding to what is fair and equitable benefit sharing, because the tool is not going to answer that question, nationalizations and the approach that you are taking, no? When you legislate, when you establish policies, we'll need to decide on that kind of things. But we will try to address in the next days the technical questions that have not been answered during the event, okay? And let me just echo what you just said, Afshar. Thank you so much to Pricewaterhouse colleagues. Thank you to you for leading the team, Afshar, for this fantastic presentation. Thank you so much, Nicolette, for providing your support, accompany UNDP on this difficult road to innovation, no? Which all of us insist that we want to be in that road. But when you move into is a bumpy road. It's not a comfortable road, and it's plenty of challenges, no? And to all the colleagues, please, this is just the design, the idea of this pilot, but is more to come, no? And the challenges ahead, as you have seen, are many. So please stay tuned. If you have ideas regarding possible implementations, if you have funds available, please contact us. We will be very interested to mobilize those funds, no? And again, there are different questions that still need to be addressed. It's a process, and we would love to continue this walk together, no? with all of you. Thank you so much, colleagues. And take care, stay tuned. We will contact you for different regional meetings and for other events at the Global ABS community. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you.